options. We click on that. So for those of you that aren't anthro people that we haven't convinced yet to switch to become anthro people, you can also be in here for your other subjects as well. If we click on anthropology, and right there we see HRAF right at the beginning. And you should have this on your computers because this is what the tutorial is going to be taking you through. Anybody having issues with that? No? We're good? Okay. So, switch back to all right, Chris, I have your screen as the main screen up here ready to go whenever you're ready to go.
Okay. Oh, I had it on and then I turned it off again. So you should see my, can you see my, my picture? No.
No, I don't see your picture.
Oh, okay. Well, let's change that because I'm right here. Hi.
Just one second. Oh, there you are.
I am here. Yeah. So I want to welcome you and thanks for joining my webinar. I hope to show you the potential of the database and how it works and how different it is than probably anything you have known or seen before. And before I launch into the various parts, I want to give you a little bit of a history of our organization. And for that, I'm going to turn off the screen because, I mean, not the screen, my camp, because I want you to focus on what you see here on my screen. And I'm talking from this building here. This is Human Relations Area Files. And
sorry, Chris, just to interrupt you 1 second. We've lost the view of your database there.
Oh, sorry.
There we go.
Okay. Now you should be back on. Do you see the building? So we're all, we're a small nonprofit organization at Yale University in New Haven, Connecticut. And we are all in this very beautiful building. And we are mostly anthropologists. So here are my colleagues. So yes, they are jobs in anthropology. And we're only 12 people. So it's a fairly small group of anthropologists that are working on this project. And we have a very long history. So our organization dates back to the 1940s, and it was the brainchild of a cultural anthropologist at Yale, George Peter Murdoch, who came up with two classification systems. One on subjects, called the Outline of Culture Materials, and one on cultures, called the Outline of World Cultures. And over the years, it was put into various formats. And the idea was to facilitate cross-cultural research, to look at information specific on cultures across the world. Now, I'm going to enter the database. So I'm entering here the default, and this is what you would see now if you're logging on. And this is a tool that enables you to find stuff specific on cultures. And I think in your class, you're covering the Yanomamo, I believe. So why don't we start out with a search and see what we can find on this culture in South America. So let's say we're interested in the food practices or the food practices in South America. Here I had already typed that in some time ago. I'm going to use this phrase to search across our database. And as we are searching, you will see the first kind of unique aspect of our entity. Before you even get to the text, you have to go through various regions of the world. So it's looking and looking and looking, and it's looking here and there. And what you don't know yet is what it is doing, what it's trying to do. So if you click on a particular link, regional link, that will give you a window to additional information, like a region, a culture name, a subsystem type. But whatever it's finding, there is only one entry that you can go to the text, and it's always through a culture name. And on this list here, I see a bunch of culture names, and they're coming up as we talk. And you can click on, let's see, which one do we want to focus on? Oh, I don't, Yagan. So these are all ethnic groups, indigenous people that are in that area. And it's still looking. Do we have any particular one we want to click on? I don't see, Mapuche. Okay, so there's one. When you open up a culture name, this will give you access to the actual text. And the way we compile it is by documents and by snippet of text, i.e. paragraphs. And by this time you might be utterly confused because you're like, what the heck is going on here? Well, what the database is doing, it's looking for this information within a very small text environment, a paragraph, and it picks up the keywords as it finds it, and it does a mapping, and the mapping goes on in terms of our thesaurus. Well, this doesn't really make a whole lot of sense unless you kind of know the entire framework, and this is what I'm hoping to explain to you. But before we do, let me just do one more click. And here you see a page and the same result in context of a page. And shall I explain how to, process the results now, or shall I wait a little bit to have a little bit more stuff?
Show more stuff if that's okay, thanks.
Okay. So now let's explore how this database is organized, because what I'm hoping to do is be clear enough so you get an idea of how powerful the system just is. So I went up to the top and I clicked Browse Cultures. There's another window or menu that is called Browse Subjects, but for now we will concentrate on Browse Cultures. This is the place where we collect all the materials we find about a culture and bundle it into what's called a culture collection. So as you come in here, you will see the default, which shows you various names pointing to a particular culture. There's some that I cannot even pronounce. So for example, Abaguzi says, oh, please use the name Guzi, or Ababa, it says, no, use Nupi. And this is just one way to explore our cultural database, coming in by any name that you think you're interested in. Another way is to click on country. So if you happen to be interested in just Afghanistan, this would be the place to go to explore. And I always recommend that anyone new to eHRAF or wanting to, and this is the way we pronounce it, eHRAF. There are different ways to pronounce it. eHRAF, but I think that's far too long to pronounce, so I will always reference our database as eHRAF. So this is just on the side. So, well, all of our cultures, and so far we have 307 cultures in our database, are compiled into 3 units. So culture summary is part of a culture collection. So here we have chosen the Baluchi to be included, and they're in Afghanistan. And since we don't know much about that culture, we like to find out a little bit more about it. So we have a nice short overview listed here. And then we have another, and then you can close it like this. And here, this is where the collection resides. All the various documents we have collected on a particular culture. So let's click on it. And, oh, here I only see one document. And, well, anyone who knows a collection, well, one usually does not make a collection, right? You have to have at least 2 or a few. So in our HRAF sense, a collection can be just one document, like here, but depending on the culture you click on, you can have different total amounts. Like here under the Pashtun, I see that there are 22 documents. If I click on the Hazara, whoops, there's only one again. Yeah, that doesn't make much. So it is important to snoop around and explore the varied culture names to make sure you get kind of a good chunk of documents, like here in the Pashtun. Now, in this menu under country and in this menu under alphabetic index, a culture name can be listed several times. So what I usually prefer is exploring eHRAF by the region, because this is also our historical way of bundling the culture information. And we have 8 major regions that we have cultural representations for, and you have to make decisions. So you decide whether you want to concentrate on South America or on Europe. And before you can get to the culture name, similar to the search that you saw, you have to first go through a regional door. So if you are interested in all of South America, well, you do have to first go and click in order to see what is there. Here, under, where are we in? Amazon and Orinoco, you see everything we have so far, but this list can change. So in the next half year, we may add 1 or 2 more, depending on whether the culture is selected randomly. So this is another important aspect of our database, in that in order for a culture to be included, we randomly select cultures from a sample. And this is because we want to be as little as biased as possible as to who we include. because when you select something intentionally, well, it's kind of cherry picking. And we like to give a culture that is a very little known culture the same respect to be included, like the Yanomamo. They're pretty famous. But as you can see, when we clicked on the country tab, the same layout. You have a culture summary to get familiar with the culture and to read through the various text. And here you already see or start seeing the other part that is pretty important to our database, in that we look at each and every text, which is our unit of indexing is always a paragraph. So this is a paragraph, and this happens to be quite a few lines, but usually those are just a few sentences. And then we read it and we say, okay, there's something in this paragraph about instigation of war, for example. And so we give it a tag, and with each tag there is a description associated with, which helps you when you choose to use this as a tool in your research to be able to find information more quickly, but also more efficiently. And this system, the outline of cultural materials, is what has developed over the last 70 years to be now online. And I'm scrolling around here, and so there's a little flexibility to it. And so if you are interested in, for example, researching food practices on the Yanomamo, then I invite you to first come here, get familiar of all the stuff that's there. So you see here there are 12 documents, and publication date range is somewhat important, because if you are looking for information that was taking place past 2010, well, you're going to be out of luck here, because this, for example, is only going up to 1995. So this publication date and the titles here are kind of important to get familiar with just a little bit, so you're not in for, nasty surprises. So here we have the various documents, and there's the culture name, Yanomamo. And in order for a document to make its way into a culture file, it has to be culture specific. What does that mean? Well, here I see a document that says rates among the Vaika. Well, if the document would read rates among cultures of South America, chances are very likely we would not include it in eHRAF. And the reason for it would be that, hey, it's not specific on the cultures that we use in the database. So the big criteria of inclusion is it has to fit our cultures to be included. So this is kind of a different way of thinking about researching a topic than you would, let's say, be familiar with in Google. Okay, so now let's click on the document. I click on Sharon, Napoleon. Here, this opens up the publication information. So my colleagues who you saw on the other page, and right now we have 3. There's one, Tef, he's from Ethiopia. He has a PhD in anthropology, and Ian, also PhD in anthropology. They all work as analysts. And when they get a document, i.e. a book, a journal, article, or a dissertation to them, they have the task of minutely going through each and every part of this text, read the text, and at the paragraph level, assign each page with these subjects. So here I've clicked on one. I could also go back, and this is kind of a good place to go around. I see here a bug that I have already reported, that there's a separation between the T and the next letter in the title. So here you have the text. And then on the right-hand side, you have the descriptive subject. And if you were to use the subject, the OCM, as we call it, and this is, by the way, just the ID number for the subject, because, you know, things go in and out of fashion. So if this changes and we call it something else, this usually stays the same. So with this in mind, I can do a hopefully more pointed search. But before I do, I also like to point out a very important part of the page environment, because when you're reading the text, there's usually no reference to or repeated reference to a time period or a field date. So if available, then we do include that in the page focus. So here it says not specified, but usually there's some kind of a reference. So with this in mind, let's switch over to my favorite search, advanced search. Yep. And I hope that you will get excited about it as much as I do, because I think it's pretty powerful. It's not necessarily the easiest tool to use, but I think once you get used to it, it might be actually fun. So here, similar to the browse cultures, you can go click add culture, and kind of like a Amazon.com shopping cart, select your culture name, either from an index. So if you type in Yanuamo, and if you make a mistake, you're not going to find anything. It also helps to click on it just to see what you can, what there is. So if I were to come in and wouldn't know the Yanuama by that name, but let's say I'm looking for Waiki, or Waika, sorry, it will point me to say, hey, use Yanuama. This is what HRAF lists as the cultural reference. So this is basically just ethnonyms, as we call it, or various names. It's a little bit like having a nickname, like my real name is Christiane. It's German. And my, you know, Chris or Jane, as I have been called in the past, would be listed under here, but my official name would then be up here with my own ID. So just see that as a you know, analogy. So now we add that to our shopping cart. Yanuama shows up here. And then we kind of do the same for the food aspect. And the default is similar to what you would see in browse subjects. And, you know, obvious big categories. It's a little bit like a cookbook, pop up right away. And here you can open up various drawers and kind of drill down to, you know, what you find matches your topic. So there's a lot of matching going on between what you hope to find and what HRAF has available as tools. And sometimes we don't always have the tools available. But here, I look around, I read. Reading is important because it will help you decide which one to use or not to use. And then I simply add my object to my shopping cart. So now let's do a search and see whether Yanuama has something on food as well. And lo and behold, what did we see? Oh, before we had only 2 results, and all of a sudden we have 59 paragraphs and 8 documents. That's pretty good, just by changing our strategies. So the only way to always enter a document is by clicking on the culture title. And there are my results with information of the unknown hidden in the paragraphs. And when I see a lot of results, like for example here, I see 59 paragraphs, I'm a little, lazy. So I always like to increase my results to the highest number because then I can much more quickly browse through them because I see them all at once. So out of how many documents were bundled into the collection altogether, I think 12. So 8 out of these 12 documents that we had seen in the other menu, in the collection document menu, 59 paragraphs have something on diet or food. And on the left-hand side, you will see the document titles that you had seen in collection. So if I just, let me go here because I want to give you a view-by-view comparison. I think that would be helpful. So I'll type in Yanuama. So here, again, you see the entirety, all 12 documents, nothing researched. And here you see that 8 of the 12 were found with having some information on diet or tagged with something on food. And why would you want to do that? Well, because it does help you to kind of explore unexpected things. Like almost all mammals were eaten, felines being the principal exception. Well, that's good. And also not a few snakes were eaten. Well, that's cool too. Birds of prey, blah, 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 also not eaten. Okay, wow. There's kind of a lot of stuff going on in this James Barker memoirs. So it's always interesting, not interesting, but it's always important to kind of like put the information into context, because only because something wasn't eaten back then, things may have changed. So if you click on page, then the focus comes up, and unfortunately, there is no specific time period listed here, but the field dates do give indication that that must have taken place, in the 1950s and not in 2010 or 15. So what's going on in here gets rationalized of what is listed here. So going about it, you can toggle back and forth. Now we're going back in here. And remember, we were in the Yanuama. So this is listed to the left. So you can click on the title. And this moves me right down here with Napoleon Chagnon. And here you can explore. You open up what I call pieces of puzzles, because here you kind of see them out of context. It's like taking a piece of a puzzle and putting it on a table away from the entire puzzle. And you're like, whoa, where does this belong to? So if you click on Show Page, it will take the same piece of puzzle and will put it into the context of the page. So we are here on page 7. We know that there are 160 pages altogether. Here is the page focus. Although there is no specific date in place, this is a time marker, which is important. And then I can click to select. And if I'm going through a document like Shagnon's, I can switch this radio dial up there, and I can go to Next. And this will put me right there where my marker or my tool, which was diet, will point me to that page, wherever it is. If I click on the page list, this will also tell me where my results are. So what I do is either way, going through this function, and I like actually this menu because this tells me where the pages are, where the food stuff is. So here I see, this is a concentration on food items. And I say, oh, this is good. Okay, small alligator, what was eaten, wild pig. So this is pretty cool because it enables you to find information on an item regardless of the wording, as long as it is about that concept that is used in tagging. Now, in order to record it, you can do a number of things. Permalink is having a URL. Cite would bring up the author name, so that's another one. Or you can do print or email. Print or email will open up a new browser tab, and it will put all the information into, a nice readable format. What's nice about this format is because it will also give you information like when it was accessed and where from. And what I really, really, really like is that when you click on that little wheel, you can add items. Like, see, I just added the culture name to give the title a placeholder in the sense of, what we use as our culture classification or organization system. Subjects we also have as a classification, so I can add that. How about an abstract? Here it goes, field date, date coverage, not specified, we know that. Library of Congress, and here I'm just adding everything all at once. So different ways to explore. But that's not only that. You can also refine your search. For that, let's choose something besides the Yanomama, and let's say we're interested in a specific aspect of diet. Let's say we're interested in cultures that use insects in their diet. Well, you can go to the keyword box, type in insect, and let's start out with one first, and I'll show you the difference. So here you have different options. You can either, just choose one culture, and this is just a raw count. It comes up with 4 paragraphs. Well, they must not be eating a whole lot of insects. And this will give the keyword, which is always nice because it kind of pops out. Like, okay, ooh, there's a picture. So you can even click on the picture. So what are they doing? They are collecting palm fruits, but not insects, I guess. So something in this paragraph is about insect as a food. Or you can go back and you can tap into the cross-cultural aspect. And by doing that, I can either go one section at a time, let's say all of South America, boom, add them, insects, and you can even do a little bit of a refinement. Okay, so what about one insect? What about a locust and a grasshopper? Or a, what else? Not flies. Flies wouldn't be good.
How about a beetle?
A beetle, yes. Okay, so this is called a truncation at the word stem. And the way I've listed them and what I usually do when I do a research in eHRAF, because I know I will take a break. And this is something I did with the last students. I just did a class for Washington State University and methods and research class. They were looking for jewelry, specific jewelry. So what I do is I kind of work off-site, because if I'm taking a break and I'm leaving our database, it will shut down, kind of like a bank website in your account in it. So then you lose all your information, and that's pretty not so good. And the reason why I also do that is to keep track of what words I'm using. And it helps me in my creativity to build up the search. So I usually start out pretty limited, and then I do the search. And as I browse around, I pick up ideas for my next search. And sometimes I'm also pretty greedy, so I like to start out with the highest number of matches first. So here what I did is a sorting by the highest number, and I click on the culture name and I browse around and I look, oh, so this would be maybe my next idea, to include caterpillars and ants and termites. So the text in itself becomes a thesaurus for word ideas. Not only that, it also kind of becomes a thesaurus for ideas of what other subjects to use in my next search. So with this in mind, I copy that and I add that. Okay, and I want to put in the truncation because, you know, a bombastic caterpillar, take out the comma because it's not gonna get me anywhere. Ants, oh boy, this is kind of a tricky one here, ants, because as you know, if I truncate ant at the A-N-T, well, I get everything from antler to maybe anterior or who knows what. So what I do with this is I usually just put in ants, and that takes care of that. Termite, well, that's okay again. So I'll use that, and I keep track of the stuff here, 264. So I'm going to start typing my little categories, and you know, after a while you do get used to the numbers, so I use that as a shortcut because it's so much faster to type than always typing eating or diet or food. And with this in mind, I go back, copy it, go back to my search, and, override that. Boom, what's this? And I add more subjects, eating. How about preparing insects in a meal? I thought they're pretty tasty in terms of protein. So this is another way you can use the database or the resource tools by going through the various menus, by typing in, the terminology, insects. Well, what's going on here? How come there isn't a reference to food? Gathering for food, but not food. So here you need to be, how should I say, critical or exercise critical thinking. Only because things don't pop up in this menu, that doesn't mean that you cannot, use them in any way you like. For the fullest way to see all the various subjects, and we have about 743, I believe, you can go to this menu here. This is called the OCM and the identifier. And this is the place that shows the original hierarchical structure of our organization system. So you see here, there is a sequence of numbers, and there is a logic to it. And the logic is not really that you record and then have food request or food quest, but to have groupings of likes. So first, usually, you do the subsistence type, you collect, you fish, you you hunt, or you raise your animals, and after you've done all that, or you do your agriculture, you process the food before you then eat it. And, while you're eating it, you may have a beer or two. That would be shown here. So I advise you to take time to browse through these ranges, because they will give you the best possible aspect as to just how rich the subjects and topics are we have covered in all various areas, on market economy to sociology related topics like marriage, to kinship, to here are the military, sickness, medical anthropology. Like my favorite one is theory of disease, and the cultural belief in how they believe what causes an illness, to the death category, mourning, rituals, religious beliefs, and so on. And sometimes you also find subjects that can be helpful in putting together really cool Boolean searches. So for example, here, what caught my eye is one that says avoidance and taboo. What if there are food taboos? So you can use that if you like, and you can add that to your Amazon.com shopping cart, and you can create yet another search. But the problem is that you have a little mumble jumble going on. So you have a 3 list of subjects. 2 are somewhat similar, and 1 is pretty, like a friend, but not a sibling. So what you need to do, if you do combine various groupings, you have to start layering and open up a new layer to define your groups a little bit better. And again, this helps you in honing in on your specific search. So, okay, so what's going on here? So we're searching for something on food or diet or eating, and this is the Boolean operator or, so one or the other. Sometimes it's referred to as any when you do a library search. Let's kick out the insects. And because in order for us to find those little snippet of paragraphs, this also has to be present. So hopefully with this combination, and why don't we just turn this into a total cross-cultural search. So now we're adding all 307 cultures to our shopping cart. We do our search. And this is what it does best. It kind of goes like a racehorse now, and it's like, oh, where there's information, where's there's information. And what's cool about this is that it will find you information in paragraphs that are also in text other than in English. Because whenever you add a keyword, well, you know, you kind of tell it to look for English. And this is truly international, goes across boundaries. So let me show you a cool trick, because you can also do a further narrowing. In this case, if you like, you can say, okay, I am interested in looking for taboos, food taboos by hunter-gatherers. See what I'm doing here? I'm hovering over to kind of get a sense of who are the hunter-gatherers in eHRAF. And then I'm clicking on it, and this automatically decreases my search results, of course, because I'm restricting it. But then what comes up are only those who are defined as hunter-gatherers. And again, you know, the common sense or logic is the higher the number of paragraphs, the more the information usually is, but not always so. So you do have to go in, click on that, you know, and see, okay, is this about X, Y, and Z? Food quest, food taboos, ha, there it is, something about fish and freely consumed, but so this is a really nice and helpful tool. It takes practice. It takes a little bit of patience to, you know, kind of get used to using the subjects. You can also do variations. So you can, if you like, use keywords. Nobody says that you shouldn't. So you can do food or diet or eating and taboo or avoid. So, you know, so you can play with it. It does help to have some kind of a logic. So this looks pretty scary, but not any worse than what you would see in Microsoft Office Outlook, which I've been learning recently ever since I switched from Thunderbird. And boy, I wish I had a pilot's license for it, because it's pretty intense of a program to use. Excel isn't so much easier either. But what it's doing here is straightforward, systematically searching across all the regions where it finds. And you can hop around and switch over, for example, to Africa and explore another culture in here, like the San, the gatherers. And it will get you to the paragraphs, and maybe you will even see a mixture maybe I overloaded it. But do you see the rationale? Like, this is a good example where just the words were picked up, and in other areas it picked up the subject and the subject, and sometimes only the subject and nothing else. So, and here are all the documents. So going over the database, remember we started out with this Google-like search. And yesterday, when I gave a demo to a student from Calgary, her eyes were kind of, I could tell, because she was very exhausted at the end. And I said, wow, tomorrow I'm giving a class to University of Victoria. What kind of recommendation do you have for the students that I tell them? And she said, it's not anything like Google. So they have to almost go the total opposite. So in order to use our database successfully, you have to think outside the box. And I find it actually a lot of fun to do. And I will give you a little trick of what I mean by that. So here, remember we did this taboo search? And these words are in these categories, and chances are, you did a basic search typing in food taboo, and it found the word food, it found the word taboo, and it made you very happy. Well, let's switch this to not. Okay, so we want any paragraphs that have not the word diet or not the word eat or thing included, and not the word taboo or avoid. And hopefully, despite the exclusion, we're finding some cool information. And this is just to make the point. So this is getting us fewer results because it may not be picking up, English texts. That's okay. It's doing the same thing. It's maybe a little bit upset because it says, hey, why not these terms? But it's very straightforward. So while we are waiting, this database helps you to associate culture names by regions and gets you to familiarity of seeing a culture that you would not otherwise know and putting it into a regional context. This will, using the subjects only, will take longer because you have to, wean away from using keywords, but it will also open up new possibilities because it will enable you to find stuff in places that you would not otherwise look at. So this is a good example where sometimes the information is not always pretty to look at or, make sense. So when you see that, be patient, be a detective, and just browse through the data like an analyst, because only because something is tagged, it's, you have to make the decision. And this is part of, being a student and learning, that you have to decide, okay, am I using it or not? And then going back to the culture results and saying, okay, I'm going to move on to use something else, or to even another area. Like here, my favorite is, for example, the Navajo. For example, there, isn't it interesting? We switched from South America to the Southwest in North America, and there is just a little sentence that has to do with food taboo, that a melon is never cut by piercing it with the point of a knife, but is cut around. I wonder where this goes back to. So this is where, when you are seeing cultural practices that you see now being performed, and you wonder where it's coming from, well, chances are there's pretty significant historical association and and some kind of a traditional, I don't know, origin. So in using the database, think of it as a collection of culture names organized by regions, and each collection has a bunch of documents that are either books, journal articles, dissertation, or monographs. They're all text-based, they're all indexed, and what I forgot to explain is that with each collection there is a collection description that gives you some kind of a general information about that culture collection. So here,
Chris?
yes?
Sorry to interrupt you. We're running into close to an hour here, and I'm conscious that I want to give the students a break before they have a second portion of their class. So I'm wondering if we can just use the last kind of couple minutes if there's any questions from the class, just to wrap up.
Yes, let's do that.
Okay. Is there any questions, guys? The mic that connects to Chris is with me, so if you're at the back of the room, it probably won't pick up your voice, so you might just have to either come stand closer or tell me what your question is, and I can speak it for you. I can be your voice. Are things clear? Do you see, I think the keyword searches are going to be really useful for you if you started thinking what your subtopic might be in terms of what you may have that's an interest for you, to start sifting through the database to get kind of an idea of what's out there. No other questions? I think we might be good.
Yeah, okay.
In terms of questions.
Okay, and before I go, you know, our homepage does has very useful tools too. So under our homepage, there is a section called World Cultures, or no, Resources, sorry, Reference Materials. So here under Reference Materials, you can click and it will be made available for example, a PDF file that has a bunch of useful things like a list of the topics and the culture names. So, you know, browse around, and here it is. And if you have questions, feel free to contact, well, the librarian or me. So,
okay, well, thank you, Chris, and I will be talking to you again in an hour or so.
Yes.
Okay.
Until then,
okay.
Thanks for listening.
Have a good break.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.